War in Ukraine. The Trump administration is closer than ever to Russia, and NATO, it looks more like a lame duck. I thought that J.D. Vance's speech in Europe would be the most surprising thing I would hear this year, but the US Trump administration just keeps on giving. Yesterday, during a meeting between Trump and Zelensky, Zelensky was ambushed by Trump and J.D. Vance in another show that reminded me more of a poor TV drama than foreign policy. The tension had been palpable all during the meeting and then erupted by a simple question from a journalist. Could the US say anything positive to calm worried people in Poland? After that, I saw what looked like almost a rehearsed attack by J.D. Vance and Trump on Zelensky, as always fueled by inaccuracies as one would expect. J.D. Vance asked if Ukraine had ever thanked USA for its aid, and that was a question that of course had nothing to do with reality. Ukraine has ongoingly thanked the USA since 2022 and even before for their support. But such facts are not important for the current US administration. So the mineral deal was not signed, and Zelensky had to leave the White House after that. It is a bad development for Ukraine and for Europe, but also for the USA. There are several reasons why foreign policy should not be handled this way. There are fighting and hard words, but always behind locked doors. Because when you bring these kind of things only for ratings, as Trump himself said, it can only lead to one thing, fracturing. And that will be very difficult to repair, and it will have implications in many other areas which does not include Ukraine directly. So I can draw some conclusions from this meeting, which are based on other recent events. Trump is pushing USA first, and I don't say America, because America is not only the USA. In reality, based on the actions of his administration, it looks more like Russia first. It is hard to draw any other conclusions based on their actions towards Russia and their actions towards what should be their allies. It reminds me very much of how a couple of bullies at school act when they see someone they want to bully. And this is not only the Ukrainian President Zelensky in the Oval Office, nor Canada or Europe. They are going after everyone except Russia. There are no attacks on Russia, nor any statements against Putin. After Russia and Putin started the biggest war in Europe since World War II. Towards Russia, we really have silence or approval. Was this a prepared attack by the US administration? Probably not. But they do not like facts to get in the way of their opinions, and they do not like when people point that out. From that fact, again from a foreign policy point of view, they act no differently than Putin. The USA is the biggest country in the world, and of course, that will have the most impact in what direction the world takes. But if the US administration tries to take on the world, except Russia, they will have to pay a price for that, just the same way as Ukraine and Europe will have to pay a price. So we have to realize that the USA cannot be excluded from the equation. It would be foolish to think that Europe could do this alone, not at this time. Europe have still been relaxing since 2022, so 3 years have passed when the actions we are seeing today should have been started. Now 3 years would not have been enough, but at least we would have started. We are still talking about decades of heavy investments for Europe to replace the USA in Europe alone. However, things can be done, and the first thing that should be done needs no investments. We need a new leader for the free world, as at least the current US administration has switched sides. Can that be done? Maybe. But there are no obvious other organizations or countries that could take the place of the USA at this time. It is not even certain it is possible on a smaller scale if we only look at Europe. France would like to be the leader, but they are much smaller than Germany. Germany is likely not willing, and the UK took a step away from Europe after Brexit. So maybe the EU could take such a step, but with countries like Hungary and Slovakia, it is also hard to see EU taking on this role. So rather than finding a new leader, Europe needs to find new allies. And the US is likely no longer an ally, but rather a disinterested, if not a lukewarm adversary. If this is correct, which looks not unlikely, then NATO as an organization is really dying. Article 5 is only as powerful as the support given by the countries. Would the USA respond if that was triggered? It looks less likely today. And I have to point out the only country that ever triggered Article 5 and had allies stepping up was the US, and the allies came from Europe. They did not come from the Indo-Pacific. For Europe to help Ukraine and itself, it definitely needs more countries to collaborate with. Canada is an obvious country. We have similar views on our society, on foreign policies, and so on. Closer financial cooperation would likely be beneficial for both. Europe cannot and should not replace the USA as Canada's biggest trading partner, but in certain areas like energy or minerals, we likely could increase collaboration significantly. Europe needs energy and minerals, and Canada needs trade. And Canada is a democracy, and that is not something you usually can say about countries rich in energy or minerals. I also think that Europe have to get closer to Turkey, as they are an important player in the Ukraine-Russian war, and they are behind Ukraine. Finally, Europe needs to look further outside the region, maybe South Korea, Japan, or other similar countries. In this shifting world, smaller countries must band together, or they will get stomped upon by the bigger actors. History tells us as much. This is true in security, but it is also true for the economy. So what can Europe realistically do right now? In reality, we have limited things that can be done in the near term or even in the medium term. So the only real winner today is in effect the Russian President Putin. Regarding the war in Ukraine, Russia is still attacking, but their attacks have decreased and so have their gains. Russia is likely waiting out events, and events are going their way on the international stage. So why would they not wait to get as much as they can? The only real thing that could change the current equation would be a significant Ukrainian military victory, and that is unlikely. For that to happen, Ukraine would need the means, which are both internal and external. I do expect Ukraine will try something, but realistically, if you lose 50% of the military aid, that will have a significant effect. I still assess that Russia does not have the means to really change the military situation until the summer of 2025. What will happen after that? That is anyone's guess. While Europe is announcing many new aid packages, including from Sweden, we have to remember that much of those includes materials that needs to be produced first. And while everyone is rearming, there is no real extra production capacity. So much of the material for Ukraine will take a long time. Europe can provide technology, but on the flip side, the US might pull their technology away from the Ukraine war. That includes surveillance, for example. The Ukrainian situation is by no means hopeless, because Russia is still facing a severe problem themselves. They are still losing materials at a high rate, and they will not be able to replace that in the coming years, and their economy is not going very well. This does not mean that Russia cannot do things, but it puts some restrictions regarding what they can do. Again, the Russian economy is the size of Italy. It is not a superpower, not even a major power. They are a power bigger than Ukraine and much smaller than Europe. The Ukrainian situation has become much more problematic, and that is the reality. I cannot see any clear path in the near to the medium term that could really improve the Ukrainian situation. What we in Europe can do is try to prevent the situation from deteriorating. Russia cannot play for time. They cannot afford to have these kind of losses ongoing. But with USA siding with Russia, the equation will change, or it might have changed already. What we can do is to show Ukraine they have allies in Europe, and that will require some more substantial political actions. Europe with Ukraine will have to try and repair the relationship with the current US administration if possible. It has to be tried in any case. In the long run, we are likely seeing a seismic shift in the world order, and we are likely still only in the prelude of that shift. My conclusions are the following. President Zelensky will in history be remembered in the same category as Churchill, a leader who stood up against a dictator. President Trump will, at best, be remembered in the category of Chamberlain, giving a country to a dictator, but that is a best case scenario for him. The more likely scenarios will put President Trump in other categories, with far more unsavory people for company. And it is not because he puts America first, but because he sides with a dictator against a democracy. I think that Olof Palme said it best in a speech held in 1972 regarding the US bombings of Hanoi. It was a speech I echoed in 2022, and it still holds true. History's judgment will be harsh. And that is probably what Trump is most concerned about. It is not the people in the US nor Ukraine, but what he will look like in a historical context. In terms familiar to the current US president, his ratings will be low. I think the Kiev Independent put it well. A president disrespected the Oval Office, and it was not President Zelensky. Regarding this channel, I was just about to shut it down, but how can I, when alternative facts are the sign of the time? So this will be the response from me regarding the meeting I saw on TV from the Oval Office. If democracy is at stake and the world is becoming much more insecure with democracy under threat, we all have to do our bit. I have a lot on my plate at this time, but I am developing a new software to handle OSINT information. I will probably see if I can get this financed, but it will take time, so do not expect anything anytime soon. But when that is done, if it is done, I will most likely be back again. For now, this channel is commercial free, at least from me, so enjoy it while it lasts. End of report.